All right, so we're doing pretty well so far, and GPT has been, for the most part, helping us out. So let's kick things up a bit and see what happens when we ask ChatGPT to create a DAX measure for us from scratch. All right, so I'm going to copy and paste my prompt. I'm using Power BI. Could you help me write a DAX formula to calculate total revenue? Certainly. Calculate total revenue in DAX. You'll need to have a table that contains a column representing the sales amount or revenue for each transaction or item. So let's assume you have a table called sales with a column named revenue. To calculate the total revenue, you can use the following DAX formula. So total revenue equals the sum of the revenue column from the sales table. Again, pretty straightforward here, and without any further context or insight into how the data model is created, the model makes an assumption here saying, hey, if you had a table, you basically just want to sum the revenue column from that table to return total revenue. And then it gives you an example here of how you can do this within Power BI. And the other great thing is that it specifically calls out to make sure that you're adjusting the code based on the table and columns within your own data model. So let's take this one step further here. And what if we want to create a DAX formula for year-over-year revenue? So we've already provided the context that, hey, we want to measure for total revenue. And now let's say, hey, we want something for year-over-year revenue. So to calculate year-over-year revenue in Power BI, you'll need a table with a date column and a revenue column. Let's assume you have a table called sales with a column named revenue and a column named date. Now, in order to calculate year-over-year revenue, you'll need to use the following DAX formula. So this formula, it's again pretty straightforward. It may not look familiar to you, but it's using variables. So it's saying year-over-year revenue equals defining this variable for current year revenue. And again, that's our summing the revenue column from the sales table. So the same thing as that total revenue measure. And then previous year revenue. This is saying we need to calculate our total revenue based on the same period last year using the date from our date column. And then we want to return the ratio, so it's using divide here, of our current year minus the previous year divided by the previous year revenue. And again, this might not be exactly what we want, right? We might want to return the actual dollar amount, so we can adjust this. But what I think we should do is we can copy this DAX code and jump over into Power BI and kind of manipulate this and see what we get for ourselves. So I'm going to copy this code. And in Power BI here, we're going to create a new measure. And we'll paste this. And you see for all of these different underlined pieces, what we actually want to do is replace this with our total revenue measure. And again, this is a report that was created as part of the new Power BI desktop course. So we can just update these column references with our revenue measure. Total revenue, same period last year. Oh, let me remove that other bracket. Same period last year. We're going to use the date field from our calendar table, right? And then divide. Right, I'm going to leave this here. I'm going to format this quickly. And it's basically saying, hey, we want to divide current year revenue minus previous year and then divide that by our previous year. Close out our DAX. We'll hit enter. Oh, we just need to quickly rename this. So I'll say GPT. All right, and from here, we're going to update this home table to our measure table. And then because we are using the divide function here, I'm actually going to format this as a percentage. This isn't going to be what we exactly want, but I've got my table going here. So I'll add in my new measure. And you can see we've got a year-over-year revenue in terms of a percentage, right? So from 2020 to 2021, 45% increase in revenue. And then we see 2021 to 2022, we've got this like 211%, which is a little bit awkward. So let's update our measure, and I actually want to return the dollar value between these. So we can remove the divide function and basically, let me return down. And basically all we want to do is just say, hey, I want to subtract the current year revenue from the previous year revenue. And then we can update our format from a percentage to currency. And we'll change our decimals to 0. So not looking any better, right? Maybe you're a little bit more confused here. So we see in 2020, year-over-year revenue is the same as our total revenue. So there's a little bit more here that we can actually do to clean this up a little bit. We can add some error checking logic to clean this up. But here's where, things get a little bit interesting. So you can see 2.9 million, right? It looks about right. 6.4 to 9.3, probably about 2.9 million. But then we've got this 6.2 million year over year here. And this is really intriguing because what's happening here is that we've actually in the dataset have a partial year for 2022. And within our revenue measure here, ChatGPT is actually using this same period last year function, right? So what this does is it returns a set of dates in the current selection from the previous year. So what that means in this instance is that because we have revenue in 2022 only through June 30th, ChatGPT is actually looking at the previous year, 2021, through June 30th and comparing it, right? So through June 30th, we could break this out by month to see exactly what we had for revenue, but it's saying that through those same time periods, there was a $6.2 million revenue difference between these 2 years, right? So saying that a little bit differently, 2022 is really outpacing the same time last year in 2021, right? If you wanted to compare these time periods, you could use something like previous year. And now you're seeing something that may make a little bit more sense intuitively, but it's still not accounting for these partial time periods. So this is just something that's really important to understand when you're using the code that is generated from these LLMs, is to really understand what all of these component functions are doing, right? It's imperative to really understand that so that you can apply that context to the numbers in the visual to understand what's being returned. Right? So remember here that ChatGPT and other LLMs, they don't have intelligence. They're just text generators. And because of this, there isn't any sort of internal code validation to make sure what's being returned actually makes sense. It's really just a product of what's available online. So let's say there's a bunch of DAX articles that talk about how to generate year-over-year revenue using same period last year. Then ChatGPT doesn't know if that makes sense based on the context of the report or the data set versus using something like previous year. So again, just all things to really keep in mind and consider when you're using these LLMs to help generate code.
Hey there, if you liked this video and you want to learn more, check out our brand new free course, ChatGPT for Data Analytics. You can find it at mavenanalytics.io. We'll walk you through our best practices and some of the most interesting use cases for tools like Excel, Google Sheets, Power BI, SQL, and Python. It's a fun little course, and it's a great way to get up to speed in these new AI tools. I hope you'll check it out and let us know what you think.